city would not be able to hold much longer. In 1258, the walls of Baghdad were finally breached. The Mongol army entered the city. The Abbasid rule was now on the verge of collapse. With the fall of Baghdad, the Abbasid Caliphate came to an end. After the fall of Baghdad, Hulagu Khan established a new state. This state would become known as the Ilkhanate stretched from Persia to Anatolia. The new state controlled the trade routes between East and West. After the fall of Baghdad, the Ilkhanate army continued, advancing westward. One by one, the cities of Syria began to fall under Ilkhanate control. But the next target of their advance was Egypt. Now they faced a powerful opponent, the Mongols. In 1260, two great armies met at Ain Jalut. The Mamluk cavalry launched their attack against the Mongol army. The battle quickly turned into a fierce confrontation. This battle stopped the Mongol advance in the Middle East. After Ain Jalut, the Ilkhanate began adapting to the lands they ruled. Persian administrators began to play an important role in government. Islamic scholars became increasingly influential around the court. The Mongols were no longer only conquerors, they had become rulers of an empire. In 1295, Ghazan Khan made a decisive choice. By accepting Islam, he changed the direction of the state. This decision transformed the identity of the Ilkhanate. The Ilkhanate had now become a powerful Islamic state. During the Ilkhanate period, the Silk Road began to revive once again. Trade between East and West became secure once again. The Ilkhanate administration secured control over the trade routes. These routes made the Ilkhanate one of the most important powers in the region. In 1335, after the death of Abu Said Bahadur Khan, the balance began to change. Struggles for the throne began among members of the dynasty. Regional commanders began acting independently. The Ilkhanate was losing its former strength. The Ilkhanate administration gradually began adopting Persian state traditions. The Karakoyunlu Turkmen began rising across Persia and eastern Anatolia. The Aq Koyunlu soon became one of the major powers of the region. The Aq Koyunlu soon became one of the major powers of the region. Although the Ilkhanate had fallen, its legacy continued to live on. Cities, trade routes, and centers of learning continued to survive. Movement along the Silk Road continued. But a new balance of power was emerging across the region. After the Ilkhanate, new movements began to rise in the east. In Central Asia, new leaders began gathering strength. Across the steppes, preparations for new campaigns were underway. Soon, one name would stand at the center of this movement. After the Ilkhanate, a new power was rising in Central Asia. The leader of this rising power would be Timur. Soon, his campaigns would reshape the fate of the entire region. A new imperial age was about to begin. By the late 13th century, the world had become a stage of powerful empires. In the west, the Byzantine Empire still survived around Constantinople. Across Anatolia, the Anatolian Seljuk state was weakening under Mongol pressure. To the south, the Mamluk Sultanate stood as the only force able to stop the Mongol advance. In the north, the Golden Horde ruled the vast steppe lands beyond the Black Sea. Further east, the Chagatai Khanate controlled Central Asia, and in the Far East, the Yuan Empire dominated China. At the center of this world stood the Ilkhanate, but its power would not last forever. Soon, a new conqueror would rise from Central Asia. His name was Timur. For centuries, Europe stood united under one faith. The Catholic Church was the most powerful authority on the continent. Kings were changing, wars were ending. But the power of the Church remained above all else. People believed salvation could only come through the Church. Fear of damnation had spread across every corner of Europe. The Church controlled not only religion, but laws, education, and human life itself. Europe was ruled under a single spiritual authority. Over time, corruption within the Church began to grow. Some priests were selling forgiveness for money. People were told that money could bring them closer to heaven. Fear had merged with faith. While the Church gathered immense wealth, the people of Europe lived in poverty. Anger was silently growing. A dangerous question was now rising across Europe. What if the Church had lost its way? At that moment, an invention appeared that would change the course of history. The printing press. Knowledge was now spreading faster than ever before. For the first time, people could freely read new ideas. Under the influence of the Renaissance, Europe was beginning to change. People were now learning to question authority. And in Germany, a monk would change this order forever. Martin Luther. Martin Luther was originally studying law. But one day, a violent storm changed his life forever. Believing he had escaped death, Luther decided to dedicate his life to God. And he entered a monastery. He prayed for hours and fasted for days. But no matter what he did, he could not find peace. While studying the Bible, Luther reached an idea that would change everything. Salvation was possible through faith alone. At that time, the church was selling documents called indulgences. People were told their sins could be forgiven. Some preachers claimed that paying money could bring people closer to heaven. Fear was controlling the faith of the people. Pope Leo X was gathering enormous wealth for St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And the sale of indulgences was spreading rapidly across Europe. Martin Luther grew furious as he witnessed these events, because to him, faith was not something to be sold. In 1517, Martin Luther wrote one of the most important documents in history, the 95 Theses. Luther nailed his theses to the door of Wittenberg Church, and the silence of Europe was broken. Thanks to the printing press, Luther's ideas spread across Europe within weeks. People were now openly questioning the church. Rome was consumed with anger. For the first time, the authority of the church was being seriously challenged. In 1521, Martin Luther was summoned to the Diet of Worms. The emperor and church officials demanded that he take back his words. But Luther refused to step back. Unless proven otherwise, I cannot take back my words. The Pope excommunicated Luther, and the Holy Roman Empire declared him an outlaw. Now anyone could kill Martin Luther without punishment. But several German princes secretly began protecting him. Martin Luther continued working while hidden inside Wartburg Castle, and he began translating the Bible into German. This moment was a revolution in European history. For the first time, ordinary people could read the Bible in their own language. The church's absolute control over knowledge was beginning to break. New ideas were spreading rapidly across Europe. The Reform movement was no longer limited to Germany. Europe was entering a new era. Luther's ideas began spreading across different regions of Europe. In Switzerland, Ulrich Zwingli was challenging Catholic traditions. Then, John Calvin emerged, and the Reformation movement became even more radical. According to Calvin, God had already determined the fate of mankind. This belief spread rapidly across Europe. Europe was no longer a single Christian world. Catholics and Protestants had begun seeing each other as enemies. As the Reformation grew, tension across Europe intensified. In Germany, the peasants began to revolt. For years, the people had lived under crushing taxes, and now they demanded freedom. Reformation ideas were turning into rebellion. But Martin Luther did not support the peasant uprising. He feared Europe would descend into total chaos. The rebellion was crushed with brutal force. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives across Europe. Meanwhile, in England, a new crisis was emerging. King Henry VIII desired a male heir. But the Pope refused to annul Henry's marriage. And England found itself in conflict with Rome. In 1534, the king was declared head of the Church of England. And thus, the Anglican Church was born. Monasteries were closed, and church lands were seized. England was now entering a completely different path. The Catholic Church realized it was facing a massive crisis, and the Counter-Reformation began. The Council of Trent was assembled. The Church was trying to stop corruption within itself. During this period, the Jesuits emerged. They became one of the strongest defenders of Catholicism. The Jesuits built schools, educated people, and spread Christianity across the world. But the conflicts in Europe were far from over. The religious division in Europe soon turned into massive wars. Catholics and Protestants took up arms against one another. In 1572, Paris witnessed a horrific massacre. Thousands of Protestants were killed during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. The streets of Europe were filled with blood and fear. The religious wars were tearing the continent apart. In Spain, the Inquisition brutally punished religious dissent. The Catholic world was struggling to preserve its authority. In 1618, Europe was dragged into a new catastrophe. The 30 Years' War had begun. The war was destroying not only armies, but entire populations. Cities burned, and famine spread across Europe. Catholics and Protestants fought each other for decades. Europe had descended into bloody destruction. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia was signed, and Europe entered a new era. The 30 Years' War had devastated Europe. Millions of people died from war, famine, and disease. The Peace of Westphalia changed the balance of power in Europe. States would now be allowed to choose their own religion. The era of a united Christian Europe had come to an end. The continent had been permanently divided. The Reformation was not only a religious movement, it was a great revolution that carried Europe into the modern age.